Being a professional baseball player is perhaps one of the greatest luxuries in the world. In fact, there's no other sport that rewards you with millions of dollars for being good 25% of the time. But what happens when hitting dingers turns into hitting your wife? Or perhaps hitting up underage girls on Instagram? Well, that's where Big Brad comes into play. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present to you the first edition of the MLB All-Jail Team. We'll start our selection process with the man behind the mask. Now I'm going to be honest with you guys. Finding a catcher worthy enough to make the All-Jail Team wasn't the easiest task. So well done, catchers. But one guy did enough after his playing days were over to pique my interest. Jim Leyritz, welcome to the team, brother. Leyritz had a successful 10-year career, with most of that time being spent with the New York Yankees. Despite never being named an All-Star, Leyritz won 2 World Series with the Yankees in 1996 and 1999. He's most known for his game-tying 3-run homer in Game 4 of the 1996 World Series and for being abnormally clutch throughout several other playoff series. Jim became a free agent after the 2000 season, and by the end of 2001, his baseball career was largely over with. He never got into any trouble while in the league, but 6 years later, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons. In December of 2007, Leyritz was arrested in Florida on suspicion of drunk driving and vehicular homicide. He struck a woman's car, she wasn't wearing a seatbelt, she got ejected, and unfortunately died at the scene. Although he was originally released on an $11,000 bond, Jim Leyritz had a difficult 3 years ahead of him. Just a few days after the accident, it was revealed that he could face further charges because his New York driver's license was suspended. Then, in 2009, Leyritz violated his bail conditions by drinking alcohol and found himself in jail for 10 days. Just a couple months later, he was arrested for battery of his ex-wife, and finally, in 2010, he stood trial for drunk driving and manslaughter. Within 45 minutes, the manslaughter charges were dropped, but he still got hit with the DUI and had to pay out $350,000 to the victim's family. Moving on, we have our pitchers, and there's no shortage of talented candidates for the All-Jail Team. After a thorough review, it's my honor to welcome Julio Urias and Byron McLaughlin to the roster. Julio Urias was quite literally a couple mishaps away from being one of the highest paid pitchers in the MLB. He became a full-time starter for the Dodgers in 2020, posting a 3-0 record over 11 appearances. As the season went on, he only got better, and the Dodgers would go on to win the World Series for the first time since 1988. In 2021, Urias posted a 20-win season, which led the majors and certified him as an elite pitcher. He followed up on this the next season by being the National League ERA leader and finishing 3rd in Cy Young voting. Some sources suggest that Julio Urias was on the verge of a $200 million contract, but before the Dodgers could put ink on paper, they needed to address the elephant in the room. Urias had transitioned from punching out batters to punching out his girlfriend. One thing that's always interesting to me is when guys get into trouble right as they're about to enter superstardom. Julio Urias is a great example of this phenomenon, considering he caught his first domestic battery charge in 2019, the year prior to helping the Dodgers win the World Series. He was suspended for 20 games, and it's pretty evident that Los Angeles had their doubts about this guy going forward. Sure enough, the Dodgers were right about their doubts. In 2023, just 1 year after leading the National League in ERA, Urias was once again arrested for domestic violence, and this time, the situation was worse. He was suspended following an internal investigation by the MLB, and ultimately, he was given 36 months of probation. Luckily for the Dodgers, his contract expired at the end of the 2023 season, and Urias hasn't pitched professionally since. Now, Byron McLaughlin might be the most unique entry on this roster, and that's saying something considering the company he's keeping. McLaughlin spent most of his career as a journeyman pitcher for the Seattle Mariners in the late 70s and early 80s. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. But as it turns out, Byron McLaughlin was a much better businessman than he was a baseball player. After hanging up his cleats, McLaughlin linked up with Korean manufacturers to produce counterfeit sneakers. We're talking Converse, Vans, Adidas, the whole catalog. He then used his connections in Mexico from his playing days to distribute them across the Mexican market. At his peak, McLaughlin was moving 80,000 pairs of fake shoes per month, sometimes pulling in over $750,000 in a single month. The man went from throwing 85-mile-per-hour fastballs to running a multi-million-dollar counterfeit empire, and honestly, respect the pivot. After pleading guilty to money laundering charges, McLaughlin fled the country before he could be sentenced and was never seen again. To this day, nobody knows where he is, so if you're watching this, Byron, nice work. Moving on to our infield, and things are about to get significantly less funny. At first base, we have Lenny Dykstra. Nails was one of the most beloved players of his era, a gritty, scrappy outfielder who helped the 1986 Mets win the World Series and later became a fan favorite in Philadelphia. 3 All-Star appearances, a guy who played like his hair was on fire every single night. But retirement did not agree with Lenny Dykstra. After his playing days, Dykstra reinvented himself as a businessman and financial guru, which in hindsight is absolutely terrifying. He launched a magazine, a car wash chain, and a financial advisory service, all of which turned out to be elaborate scams that defrauded dozens of people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. When the walls started closing in, he resorted to credit card fraud, money laundering, and grand theft auto to try and dig himself out. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, it gets way worse. Dykstra was also arrested for sexual harassment, accused of sexual assault, and convicted for sexual misconduct after soliciting sex on Craigslist. Multiple times. The man was a one-stop shop for criminal activity. He's done multiple stints in prison and is currently out on parole, presumably brainstorming his next business venture. At second base, meet Jose Offerman. Offerman was a legitimate talent, a 2-time All-Star who racked up nearly 1,500 career hits and could play virtually anywhere on the infield. He had a long, respectable career, and then he ended it with the bat, literally. In 2007, while playing for the Bridgeport Bluefish in the Independent Atlantic League, Offerman charged the mound after being hit by a pitch. Normal enough in baseball, except Offerman didn't drop his bat. He went after the pitcher and the catcher with it, concussing the catcher so severely that his career was effectively over, and breaking the pitcher's finger. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree assault and never played professional baseball again. For what it's worth, Offerman wasn't done after that. In 2010, while managing in the Dominican Winter League, he punched a first base umpire during a playoff game. Some guys just can't help themselves. At third base, we have one of the most terrifying human beings to ever put on a baseball uniform, Albert Belle. Belle was an absolute monster at the plate. 5-time All-Star, 3-time RBI leader, and the guy hit 50 home runs in 1995 at a time when that number meant something. But Belle was also known throughout his career for being genuinely unhinged. He hit a base runner in the face with his forearm on purpose. He chased kids with his car on Halloween after they egged his house and struck one of them. He used a corked bat and then had a teammate break into the umpire's room to steal the evidence. On the field, this guy was much-watched television for all the wrong reasons. But the post-career stuff is what lands him on this roster. After retiring in 2000, Belle was arrested in 2006 for stalking his ex-girlfriend, for which he received jail time and probation. Then in 2018, he was arrested at a spring training game in Scottsdale after exposing himself to 2 adults and 2 minors, while also getting hit with 2 DUI charges at the same time. Albert Belle, ladies and gentlemen, the most unhinged man on this roster who also happened to be a borderline Hall of Famer. And now our shortstop, and this is where things get truly dark. Wander Franco was the most hyped prospect in baseball for years. He signed an 11-year, $182 million contract extension with the Tampa Bay Rays in 2021 at just 20 years old. He was an All-Star in 2023. The kid was supposed to be the face of the franchise for the next decade. Then, in August of 2023, Dominican authorities opened an investigation into Franco for an alleged relationship with a minor, and it only got worse from there. In July 2024, Franco was formally charged with sexual abuse of a minor, sexual exploitation of a minor, and human trafficking. Prosecutors presented 600 pages of evidence alleging that Franco had a 4-month relationship with a 14-year-old girl and that he transferred large sums of money directly to the girl's mother to purchase her consent. In June of 2025, Franco was found guilty. He received a 2-year suspended sentence, meaning he avoided prison, but the judge looked him dead in the eyes during sentencing and told him not to approach minors for sexual purposes. And while all of that was happening, Franco found time to get arrested in November 2024 on a separate gun charge following an altercation. He hasn't played in the MLB since August of 2023, he's no longer being paid by the Rays, and immigration experts say his conviction makes it nearly impossible for him to ever obtain a US work visa again. $182 million, gone. Career, gone. All before his 25th birthday. Now let's head to the outfield, where this roster absolutely does not disappoint. In left field, Darryl Strawberry. If you're a baseball fan of a certain age, this one hurts. Strawberry was generational. 8 All-Star appearances, 4 World Series rings, a pure power hitter who some argued had the highest ceiling of anyone to ever play the game. But cocaine had other plans. Strawberry's off-field issues started early and never really stopped. Drug possession, drug use, multiple suspensions, missed seasons. In 1999, he was arrested for soliciting sex from an undercover officer and had cocaine on him at the time. Then, in 2000, he took a handful of painkillers before driving to meet his probation officer, blacked out behind the wheel, rear-ended another car, and tried to flee the scene. An off-duty cop witnessed the whole thing and arrested him at gunpoint. What makes the Strawberry story genuinely tragic, beyond the wasted talent, is that the man also survived colon cancer twice. He fought through something most people never come back from and still couldn't outrun his own demons. Darryl Strawberry is simultaneously one of the saddest and most compelling stories in the history of the sport. In center field, we have Elijah Dukes, and I'm going to need you to buckle up for this one. Dukes was a legitimate 5-tool prospect with the Tampa Bay Rays in the mid-2000s. Scouts loved him. The talent was undeniable. But Elijah Dukes was also a deeply troubled individual who made it very difficult for anyone to root for him. In May of 2007, Dukes was arrested for threatening the lives of his wife and their children. Now I know what you're thinking. How bad could a voicemail really be? Let me read you the transcript. Quote, "Hey dog, it's on dog. You dead dog. I ain't even bullshitting. Your kids too dog. It don't even matter to me who's in the car with you." End quote. That's a man threatening to murder his own children on a voicemail. It's one of the most unhinged things you'll ever read. 2 months later, Dukes threw a bottle of Gatorade at a 17-year-old girl who confronted him to tell him that she was pregnant with his child. He was traded to the Washington Nationals, given every opportunity to turn things around, and was out of baseball by 2009. The talent was real, the rest of it was just a lot. And finally, our DH, Jose Canseco. Look, you can't make an all-jail team without Jose Canseco. The man is basically the patron saint of professional athletes making baffling decisions. Canseco is one of the most physically gifted players of his generation. The first player ever to hit 40 home runs and steal 40 bases in the same season, a 2-time World Series champion, and an AL MVP. He was must-watch television. And then there's everything else. In 1989, Canseco was arrested for carrying a loaded gun. In 2001, he was charged with 2 counts of assault and battery after a bar brawl. In 2008, he was detained by immigration officials for allegedly trying to smuggle drugs across the Mexican border. He openly admitted to using steroids and then wrote a book about it, outing half the league, which somehow made him simultaneously the most hated and most respected man in baseball. The wildest part of the Jose Canseco story is that despite all of it, the arrest, the scandals, the book, the reality TV appearances, the man has never once seemed embarrassed by any of it. That kind of confidence, honestly, you almost have to respect it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your MLB All-Jail Team. From counterfeit shoe empires to machete attacks, from World Series heroes to 45-year prison sentences, baseball has truly given us everything. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe and check out my All-Jail Team videos for every other sport.